5 years have passed, and it's time to bring back this tradition of listing all the cars of Cassio Cortes, but this time with a different twist. Another video from the Quebando series, Doug DeMuro. I'm going to rank all the cars I've had in my 26 years of driving from worst to best. And that's 35 cars in 26 years. That's crazy, right? That's an average of 1.3 cars per year. Since there's a lot to cover, I won't drag this out too much. Let's start with the worst car I've had, right? That's an easy one, isn't it? The car I bought for $800, I couldn't expect much from it. My Dodge Caravan 93, which was both my car and my home for 6 months. It ended with an engine fire at the IndyCar finale in Dallas in 2004, right? So it also had an ending it deserved. It earned that last place. And what? Only years later, watching Breaking Bad, did I realize that those little crystals, those bluish crystals that were in the corners of the car, right? When I took out the seat so I could sleep in the back, I threw the seat away. Yeah, it was probably methamphetamine, right? It was crystal meth. So I bought this lemon, but it lasted me 40,000 kilometers in 6 months, so I can't really complain too much. Second to last on the list, the second worst car I've had, Honda City EX EXL company car. Back in my Red Bull days with that 1.5 really weak. No way, naturally aspirated engine with little torque and still automatic. It wasn't even CVT at the time, it still had a torque converter automatic, right? But with CVT then, even worse. The great thing about this city was that it led to one of the best car jokes from my Red Bull days, since all the national managers had this city, right? And a colleague of mine looked at that parking lot at an event in the countryside of São Paulo where everyone was parked there and said, "Is this a Red Bull event or a Boston Medical Group event?" Those who know. 31st on my list, there are 35 cars, but there are some ties. So yeah, in total, from 1 to 33, that's what we're going through here. 31st Renegade Sport, nothing against the car, but also nothing much in favor. It was probably the only car I ever bought in my life, the only brand new car I bought, like someone buying a toaster, right? I bought it as an appliance. I bought it because it was cheap and powerful, and the Renegade is a good companion for daily use, but it's a car I bought without any passion, without any emotional attachment, and I didn't keep it for long either. So, yeah, I had it briefly and didn't use it much. It had a brief moment in calumny, but then the Renegade can't climb any higher on the list. 30th, Civic LX, inherited from my mother after she passed. It was a good car, but also, a Civic 1.8 with a 4-speed transmission. Yeah, it's a car that obviously I wouldn't have wanted to inherit, right? I wish my mother had lived much longer than the 64 years she did. So yeah, it didn't leave any big, there's no way it could be ranked higher than it is here. Yeah, moving up now, here comes the first controversy, yellow Fiat Coupe, 1996, right? Our Ragazza. It was a beautiful car, but beautiful aesthetically, right? I'm a big fan of the Fiat Coupe. It was my dream car. When I was 18, I really wanted to have a yellow Fiat Coupe. That's why I got that yellow Fiat Coupe. But it was a crappy car, right? It was a car, but it wasn't a status car, right? It was a car that had been tuned and then restored. Its original color, by the way, was green. And then, when you get a beater, take it apart and put it back together, it's never going to be a good car, right? A car that had electrical problems, yeah, it would stall easily. The panels, the fender, the hood were kind of misaligned. It was a car that looked good in photos, but up close in the details, it was really, really, really messed up too, so there was no way to rank it any higher here. Moving on, Toyota Pacheco, which was another car I bought in an emergency. I was left without a car during Carnival, my first Carnival in São Paulo, in 2007. And in a hurry, I bought this Toyota Pacheco for 12,000 reais and it let me down right when I was coming back from Carnival in Ubatuba. I came back from Carnival in Ubatuba in that Toyota Pacheco on top of a tow truck. On an Ash Wednesday, it took something like 6 or 7 endless hours that I will never forget. I fixed the fuel pump on that Pacheco and promptly got rid of it. I had to buy that Toyota Pacheco in a hurry because 2 weeks earlier, the only serious accident I ever had out on the street, my first car, right, the Chevrolet Tigra, was hit at the corner of Canhagago Street and Teodoro Sampaio here in São Paulo by a lady who was talking on her cell phone, right? Back then, pairing Bluetooth and similar things weren't common. The person was distracted, talking on her cell phone, ran a red light, and totaled my Tigra. And then I was left without a car, I said, for Carnival, right? How was I going to get around during Carnival without a car? That's why I had to buy the Pacheo. The Tigra is a car that, wow, it was a beautiful car. It was the plan B after the Fiat Coupe, right? When my mom saw the Fiat Coupe, she said, no, that's a Ferrari, you'll kill yourself. Thanks to the Tigra's Corsa dashboard, I managed to convince everyone in my family, right? If you passed the Federal University entrance exam, you got a car. So I managed to convince them that the Tigra wasn't a Ferrari, it was just a Corsa. And a lot of happy memories, right? It wasn't a bad car, but it was a slow car, right? So considering everything that came after, it doesn't go much higher in our ranking either. Yeah, 26th here, Ford Ranger Black, another car that goes a bit along the same lines as the Renegade. I liked it, I used it. It was more during a phase when I was really into biking and all that. It served me very well, but it's also a car that doesn't really hit those emotional buttons, you know, but it's a good car. Yeah, 25th, Peugeot 208 GT, great daily driver here in Sao Paulo, even though it had a bit of lag, right? It was a little sluggish down low. And it was a car that was disappointing on the track, right? I got it after I sold another car that's going to be a little higher up on this list to pay off my apartment. I got a cheaper car, which was this 208 GT. And it was also a very cramped car inside. You can see it nowadays, right? It's been what, about 10 years since the 208 GT was launched in Brazil. It didn't really catch on, did it? It doesn't have a cult following in the track day or aftermarket world because it's not such a dynamically interesting car. But yeah, it's not like I have a lot of criticism about it either. It just didn't leave much of an impression. And then in the 24th Subaru Impreza GT, which was the naturally aspirated WRX, let's put it that way, right? It was the most famous body style of the Subaru midsize hatchback with 4 doors, right? 5 doors in Brazil. And it was this GT version that had the WRX wheels, the WRX body kit, but with the 2.0 naturally aspirated engine with 160 horsepower. It was a really nice car too. But it was a company car. I managed to get it through the company. I didn't keep it for that long. It didn't leave that much of a mark, but it was a really nice car to drive, right? That minor fire at the company. Really cool car. 23rd Freelander 1V6, right? That car was from 2006. I had it in 2010. It's the main car in the story of the worst ride ever, which you've either seen or will see soon in the Territorio Blindado video. It's a pretty long story. I won't tell it here. White car with caramel leather interior. It was a car that made a good impression, but the V6 liked to overheat. And I also ended up keeping this car for about 6 months, maybe 9 months or so, because then I got promoted at the company and got the city. I had to sell the Freelander, right? I wasn't going to keep a car with such high operating costs. No need for that. Yeah, 22nd Audi A4 Avant manual 20 valve naturally aspirated. Really rare, right? The manual A4 Avants in Brazil. It was the first car I bought when I came back from the United States and moved to Sao Paulo, right? I came back from the United States to Sao Paulo in 2006. I rescued my Tigre, which had stayed at home like a mausoleum to the son who had left, at my house in Porto Alegre, right, at my parents' house, and then I brought the Tigre to Sao Paulo. I was split in two by that old lady with the cell phone. I got the Paseo Pacheo Espressa to avoid being without a ride during Carnival. Yeah, I had a fuel pump problem with the Pacheo during Carnival, not on the way back. Now I want a car that's really going to be my car here in this new life of mine in Sao Paulo. And one of my best friends in the United States had an RS4 Avant 2.7 V6 bi-turbo, right? Obviously, not only did this car not exist here in Brazil in that generation, right? There was no official import, but even if it was available, I had no chance of buying it, so I got the closest substitute. It was a nice car. Thinking about it now, maybe it even deserved to be a little higher on the list. Yeah, I think so if I count considering that the Tigre was left behind in Porto Alegre. I think this A4 Avant is the car I kept for the longest time. I bought it at the beginning of 2007, right? After Carnival. And I managed to trade in the Pacheo, right? By the way, that's a good story, right? I had paid $12,000 for the Pacheo. And this A4 Avant was going for 35,000 Ries. And then I went to trade it in, right? Hoping for about 10 at least. And the guy offered me 4. Then I said, come on, 4,000 Ries? That's the price of a Uno 1.090? You're kidding me. He said, yeah. But the Uno 1.090 I can sell here in 15 days. Your Pacheo will sit in my showroom for 9 months, but I held firm and got 10,000 for it. But that's just a bit of knowledge about the used and nearly new car market, right? Yeah, I only sold the A4 Avant in 2010. I kept it for 3 years, right? I traded it for the Freelander, which I ended up keeping for a short time, but the A4 Avant was the car I kept the longest. 3 years, that manual A4 Avant. Yeah, it's unfair. Her position here is unfair. Morally, it should be a bit higher. 21st Suzuki Swift, right? When I had the Boxster S, which we'll talk about in a moment, right? Not the GTS here. I got a bit tired of using the Boxster S on a daily basis. I missed having a more practical daily driver. I bought the Suzuki in a good deal. I was going to sell my motorcycle, right? My Interceptor 650 over at Old School. It turned out that the owner of the Suzuki Swift agreed to take my Interceptor. I went to sell the motorcycle, but came back with the car instead. The Suzuki is great, no complaints, except it's not very powerful or fast. But it's a really nice car for everyday use here in São Paulo. Yeah, number 20 Freelander 2 Dynamic, right? It was, an expensive car that I bought at the time. Yeah, I was newly single here in São Paulo, right? During the Acelerados days. So I made an investment, and it was a really well-equipped car, right? With the 2.0 turbo 240 horsepower. Yeah, I sold it too when it was over. One of the times I did this twice. I bought the car while it was still under warranty, you know? Those certified pre-owned programs. When the warranty ended, I was like, nope, I'm not going to take that risk here, and I moved on. But it's also a car with good memories. Number 19 on the list, Mini Cooper John Cooper Works, right? The little red one, R56 from that generation. A car that in deep automotive depression during my days working in Red Bull Communications and driving the company Honda City, I ended up buying to have some joy on the weekends. But it's a car that's way too stiff to use daily in São Paulo. When I left Red Bull and started that digital startup called Acelerados, right? That's when I lost the Honda City. Right after that, I also inherited my mom's Civic. I sold it, right? Startup life, you're short on cash. So at the beginning, at the start of Acelerados, this Mini became my daily driver, and I couldn't handle it. A year of using the Mini as my daily, then I passed it on to a sucker. Gerson Campos bought it. I told him, look, I'm selling it to you, but you'll only last a year. He sold it after 364 days. That's when the old company started to gain a little traction, got a contract with the Bozo TV system. I said, look, I can buy a more interesting car, right? So I bought an Audi A3 1.8 Sport Red, 2 doors, really cool car. It's the car I sold to pay off my apartment, right? I was very satisfied with it. It's excellent for daily use in São Paulo and has a rare configuration in Brazil, right? The A3 from that second to last generation, 2 doors, 1.8 red, a beautiful adventure companion. 17th, the car that really, made me say, look, pickup trucks are what suit my life, my style. I need to have a pickup, right? For my lifestyle. I like to travel, take trips to more remote places. I like to bring my bike. I bought the Belize Blue Ranger Storm and I was very happy with it. It was one of the cars with the most fun stories, right? I was already dating Roberta at the time. So it was about loading up all our stuff, the dog, the parrot, and driving 4,000 kilometers down south on vacation. The Ranger Storm was the pilot project for that. And it's also a car that left me with good memories. And one bad memory, right? A car that was stolen the day I sold it. So I had a hard time trying to recover the value of that Ranger Storm. 16th, Renault Sandero RS, right? The car that I also worked on as a little project at my old house. But the Sandero RS is a really cool car, right? It's a very honest car because it gives you a lot for what it costs, right? Spectacular dynamic behavior. It's rugged, right? It's a car you can push hard here in São Paulo without fear. Really, when it comes to track behavior, right? Steering, suspension, gearbox, brakes. At 70,000 reais, which was the price at the time, it was almost a joke how good it was, right? A gas-guzzling car with a rustic, simple design, but a great car, the Sandero RS. I'm very proud to have owned my little Sandero RS in fire red. Yeah, 15th, 306. Rally right? It was the car I shared a little with my dad in my last year of college. Then it became the Acele Carro, that track day car we made with the worst project name in the history of the Brazilian internet, which was Acele Transformação that we did with Mercado Livre on Acelerados. The car had spent 10 years parked on the street in Rio de Janeiro with my sister, right? The car was a wreck. We turned it into a track car. But that car, I was really happy with it in my last year of college. 14th, Alpha 156, the sport wagon, right? Red. It's also a beautiful car. Also, one of the few I regret selling. Its value went up later, right? But at the time, I didn't have room in my life to have two classics. The other classic will show up on this list soon. 13th, a car that was here recently, right? The car we bought and sold last year, Subaru WRX SW Bug-Eye, right? Man, a beautiful car, a pleasure to use every day. I joke that this car is what the Gold Turbo we dreamed of back in the 80s and 90s should have been, right? That whole burpesh thing, but with grip, right? With good handling, with all-wheel drive, with a low center of gravity. I didn't keep it long since I got it after selling the Boxster S. I wasn't really interested in it, so I enjoyed it briefly and then sold it. 12th, Volvo V60 Allegretto Reloaded, right? This car, look, I sold it at market price and I keep thinking about selling it for 150,000 Rs. This car, wow, there's nothing as good for everyday family use in the 150,000 Rs range as this car, right? It was a Momentum version, I think, but we made it look like a Polestar, right? So the car was all black on the outside. I put on the gold calipers. The car looked really nice. Caramel interior. The car I bought from Kavak, right? In excellent condition. Yeah, but life moved on and we passed it along. But that car, it's one of those cars that the moment you sell it, you already feel a little bit of regret. Yeah, 11th. Honda Civic Si G10, right? The big red coupe. That one doesn't twist, huh? Unlike the G8, which twists the front subframe a lot, yeah, it's a car that brings back great memories, right? The car I had when I met Roberta, on our first date, I let her drive, which she said was something that really stood out, right? It showed that I wasn't a toxic macho guy thinking that a woman couldn't take the wheel of a sports car. Yeah, and it did a lot of miles on Dutra, Carvalho Pinto, and Ayrton Senna, right? Because during the first 2 years of our relationship, Roberta was working at Globo Rio. So a good part of those 2 years was making that round trip in the Civic Si, a car that also only brings back good memories, and that went up a lot in value. Also, after I sold it, even though I've already sold the vast majority of my cars, right? Especially with these beaters. It's business for me, right? I usually sell for more than I paid. I choose cars that I know will appreciate in most cases, right? So several of these cars here I sold for more than I paid, but after I sold them, they appreciated a lot more and more, and that gives me a bit more regret. But life is made of finite resources, right? So we're starting our top 10 here. Yeah, the Boxster S Gill, right? My first Porsche Boxster S 2001 manual with a big exhaust. Really fun car. Yeah, it just doesn't rank higher because by today's standards, it's not a fast car anymore, right? And it was a very old car. It was a car you had to be a bit more careful with, especially if you used it more often, which is what I did. So much so that it ended up convincing me to add the Suzuki Swift into the mix, to get more cars, right? The Z3 in California was a very memorable experience, that characteristic BMW smell, right? And it's a very beautiful car, silver, an impeccable car, really well preserved. And I used to call this car Land Shark, right? Because the Z3 has that long hood, you know? And it was silver. It looked like a land shark, a car with really good memories. Yeah, P8, the original Lagerta, right? A Volvo 850 T5R, you know, it was a T5, right? But the great Josias Oliveira, you know, the automotive journalist who has already left us, yeah, he was right on trips to events in the United States. He brought the parts, so he brought the wheels, brought the body kit, brought the rear spoiler, the T5R spoiler. So the car visually was a T5R, right? And the power difference is small, right? It's 225 horsepower in the T5, 240 in the T5R. And it was a really fun car, right? When the 5-cylinder turbo kicked in, it would spool up and go into like an overdrive. It felt like warp speed from Star Wars, you know? The car, would go down the highway, and the sound of those 5 cylinders is amazing, right? Plus, it's a very iconic car, right? All the history in the BTCC, the look, that boxy shape that's different from anything else, right? It's a car with a lot of personality. Yeah, number 7, Passat TS 1982, the Passat I built for Papa Cortes in that special Father's Day episode, which was really memorable. This car was with my dad for about 3 or 4 years in Porto Alegre. Then my dad, who had just become a widower at the time of that video, started dating, and then he lost the parking spot for the car. I brought this car to São Paulo, where I kept it for another 2 or 3 years. And then, that's when I buy the Alfa 156 that I get rid of the Passat, because I didn't have a parking spot to keep both cars. But it's that old story, right? All these cars, the Alfa, the Passat, the Fiat Coupe, like I used to say, the Fiat Coupe, no, right, the Fiat Coupe. I sold them on gladly, but they're cars that I sold for more than I paid for them. So it's part of the business, right? The famous phrase from Sheikh Hatcher Maktoum, 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 Al Maktoum, founder of the NGO, whom I interviewed during my time as a racer in the United States, right? And he said, love the money, not the product, right? When the offer is good, you have to let it go. That's true for the next car, the Toyota Sequoia V8, which I bought. There are only 13 Sequoias in Brazil, right? I really searched hard to get this car. I found it by a long shot, an 8-seater car. It was really useful for me in this situation with a small child, a dog, a bicycle. But one fine day, a follower sent me a DM and offered a significantly higher amount than what I had paid. And then, love the money, not the product, I passed the Sequoia on. Replace, and I did replace, right? This function with a car that's going to be a little higher up on this list already. Number 5, Mazda MX-5, right? It was my second car. It was the first car I bought. In my second to last year of college, I started making a little more money on television. I convinced my dad that I would give up my Tigra and pay the difference for this MX-5. But my sister had a 97 Goal, so I convinced my dad to put the Goal in the deal, and the difference in value between the Goal and the Tigra. He paid the difference, and I paid the extra from the Tigra to the MX-5. The Tigra went to my sister, but she didn't like it, so she drove the 360 more. My dad's 306 Rally was a mess because the garage was lined up, but I brought automotive chaos to the family, and the MX-5 became my daily driver. Later, when I went to the United States, my dad kept the Tigra, the MX-5, and the 306 Rally, right? Yeah, and my parents and my sister were living in the house in Porto Alegre. The one who started using the MX-5 daily, the one who liked using the MX-5 the most, was my mom, believe it or not. Yeah, only good memories. It was also a car that I sold for much more than I paid for it, but I was going to the United States. I had it for a year and a half, right? That was when I went to the United States. Yeah, today, that MX-5 of mine is a car that's worth 200,000 reais in the Brazilian market, right? But with the money I got from selling the MX-5, I bought the Z3 in the United States. Number 4 and number 3, I put them all together here. That's why the list says P33, but actually it's 35 cars, right? These are the various 40s I had from Volvo, right? We started with the XC40 hybrid, then we went to the XC40 electric, then to the C40. We're already on the second C40, which actually is now called EC40, which was a big awakening to electric cars in daily life in São Paulo, right? After you use an electric car as your daily urban car, you'll never see any sense in having a bunch of explosions generating heat and vibration when all you want is to go buy bread at the corner, right? The electric car is much more rational, much more logical. If it has 408 horsepower like the C40, the X40 twin motor, which is what we've always had, then we're on our third one of these. It's a joke in traffic, right? Every gap you see, boom, and with one pedal drive, it's a car that goes from point A to point B in São Paulo like it's nothing, and it costs us practically zero in monthly fuel costs here since I have solar panels at home, the Volvo all box. Afterwards, only those who have never had the experience aren't convinced that an electric car is the best car for daily use in the city, right? It makes much more sense in every way. I even find it funny, this thing about gearheads not liking electric cars. Gearheads should actually be the ones who encourage electric cars the most, right? Because gasoline is a finite resource, And it's expensive, right? So the fewer people who just want to go from home to work and back, who have no emotional connection with the car, who aren't passionate about it, the fewer of those people burning gasoline, the more gasoline we have left, right? Yeah, the easier it will be for combustion cars to keep existing, and combustion cars will exist. No one is going to scrap this Boxster GTS back here, right? In 2035, it's going to become a niche thing. If you're a well-informed guy and you watch the channel's videos, you know that. Legally, combustion cars are marked for death as a large-scale mobility solution in the world. Yeah, but as an object of pleasure for enthusiasts, they'll never die, right? It will be manufactured as a niche product 9 years from now, and it will keep existing. This 2015 Boxster will still be around in 2035. So, we'll still have some gasoline left, right? But as a daily driver, the electric car is like the iPhone, and the regular combustion car, the one without any emotional appeal, is going to seem like a Motorola StarTAC. from 25 years ago. Yeah, so our podium, right, starts with the Volvo EC40 third place, second place. This guy here, right, Boxster GTS, puts a smile on my face every time I sit behind the wheel, even just to buy bread at the corner. Yeah, it's an event, right? The car has an exhaust, it has PDK, it has driving modes, it has a roof that disappears, right? It's a convertible, it's the last car. The car to be built is a sports car, right? Fjord Ferdinand Porsche said that, not me, and I'll add it will be a convertible. And the number, right? What happens? Just like I ended up with this Boxster GTS from the union of a 2001 Boxster S with a 2015 Swift, the 2015 Boxster GTS was born. Yeah, when I sold the Sequoia, right, I started needing another big car that I could use to carry my stuff and take long trips. You know, those end-of-year trips we usually take, for example. Yeah, what comes out of the clash between a Boxster GTS and a Sequoia? A 2025 Ford Ranger Raptor, which is the newest member of the garage. Awesome, just the way it should be. Orange, this Sahara, the car is basically like new. I got it with 13,000 kilometers. And first, if the three coolest cars of my life weren't the three cars I have today, I'd be crazy, right? I'd have to sell them and go after something from the past if I thought any of those were cooler than the three I have today. That's one thing, but the Ranger Raptor really is. If you're going to have a car in Brazil and you're not a single man, you have a family, you have a child, yeah, man, and you like cars, you like to speed up, and you live in Brazil, a third world country, where the roads are bad, where you'll face floods, where you'll drive on dirt roads, there's nothing that compares to the Ranger Raptor, right? It's the car with the biggest bars, the biggest bar extension in FIFA soccer, right? The biggest, it's the area of the graph, Aranya. So yeah, in that sense, it's the coolest car I've ever had, especially being as orange as it is, right? With the exhaust in bar mode, making that kind of noise. So there it is, right? The podium, today's three cars, Volvo EC40 Boxster GTS and Ranger Raptor. But there it is, the full list of the 35 cars I've had in these 26 years as a licensed driver. So, did you agree with the ranking? Did anything catch your attention? Is there any car that's really out of place? Let me know in the comments, leave a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel. And now we're going to Germany, then I'll be sent to the World Cup, and when I get back, I'll do it too. So, the ranking of all Cassio Cortes motorcycles, right? Our Yamaha R3 is back here too, so it also deserves it. I didn't have 35 motorcycles, but I had quite a few, so there will also be a ranking video about that. Yeah, this isn't like a Waldogo, because as far as I know, Waldogos don't ride motorcycles. Thanks a lot, take care of yourselves, and a big hug.